Let's go ahead and get rolling. So, all right, everybody, welcome to the Endurance Sports University Triathlon Study Hall, episode number 4. Today is July 28th. Should be some good stuff today, so let's get rolling through this. All right. So, those of you that don't know me, Ryan Reel, head coach and founder here at Endurance Sports University, USAT Level 2 coach, youth and junior certified coach, master's degree in exercise physiology, biomechanics, have a second master's in organic and biological chemistry, USA Triathlon High Performance Team head coach and team director from 2011 to 2015. Was a Training Bible elite coach from 2013 to 15, and then kind of broke off on my own and decided to go with the Endurance Sports University. So, all right, agenda for this evening. We're going to do a short presentation, 3 keys of running biomechanics, and then we're going to get into the question and answer. So any questions you guys have as we roll through, go ahead and type them in. I'll do my best to answer them, and if I don't get them while we're talking, I'll get them once we're all done. So let's go ahead and get rolling. All right, so key number 1, running biomechanics. We're going to talk about forward lean. Okay, so what we're looking at is the toe off position. We're looking at the angle that is measured going perpendicular to the ground, so that's the yellow line that we're seeing right here, and then we're drawing a line from the runner's hip up through their ear, right? And that's what we're measuring as forward lean. Ideally, we want it somewhere between 7 to 9 degrees. You can see the example we have right here. This woman is at 6 degrees, so it's a little bit on the lower side of where we would want to have forward lean, okay? So ultimately, the big take home from forward lean that I want you guys to think about is the lean is coming from the ankle. So the entire body is leaning forward as a unit versus just leaning from the hips, which you would just call bending over from the hips. All right, so forward lean, that's going to be the first and the most important key to running biomechanics. Now, ultimately, there's 10 different things that we would take a look at if we're going to do a full running biomechanics analysis. What we're going to go through is the 3 main ones today. The other 7, very important, but these 3 that we're going to cover today ultimately drive a lot of the mechanics, and they drive a lot of running ability. So forward lean, that's number 1. We're looking from the toe off position, angle that is from the hip up through the runner's ear, and then a line that is perpendicular to the ground. So forward lean is the first one. Second one is extension. All right, so with extension, we're looking at the driving leg or the driving hip as the runner is toeing off. So you can see this is the same woman that we were dealing with before. We're measuring from the hip. We have a line going perpendicular to ground, but now it's going straight down. And then the second line that we're going to measure is from her hip to basically the patella tendon. All right, so we're looking at the amount of extension that we're getting as the runner is pushing off of their leg that is driving them forward. Ideally, the hip to knee angle that we're looking for is somewhere between 24 and 30 degrees. Anything that's less than that, the runner is too vertical. They're running too upright. And what that ultimately is going to lead to is a lot of bouncing up and down, which is a waste of energy. And it's essentially, if any excess bounce or upward motion that you're doing while running is essentially creating a climbing situation, even if you're on flat ground. All right, so the forward lean and the extension ultimately support each other. And at the end of this real quick presentation, we're going to have some pictures of some professional triathletes, some elite caliber marathoners, so you can really look and see this is what the big kids are doing, and that's what we need to get to, right? So the woman that we're looking at here, this was from a few years ago at an Ironman Arizona camp we did, and ultimately, this is the second day of running. I had some footage and some pictures of her running on the first day before we talked about biomechanics at all. And then we came out, we filmed it there, and then we came out the next day, we did a gigantic brick workout. So she rode, I think it was about 5.5 hours, and then this is her running off the bike. And if I showed you the pictures that we filmed before we talked about running mechanics, they were far, far, far worse than this. So all this woman was really focusing on was increase the forward lean, right? Because the more forward lean we have, it's automatically going to increase the extension, right? So she was, if we go back to the forward lean, she was at 6 degrees here. I believe she was about 4 degrees before. So I'm pretty much running straight up and straight down. When we look at the extension, I think she was at about 6 degrees before. So the simple focus shift within her own mind of what she was trying to accomplish helped her. And keep in mind, this was after riding 90 to 100 miles, right? So this is the ability to maintain your mechanics after a long ride. That also starts to become an issue, right? So when we look at the forward lean and the extension together, right, the more forward lean, the more extension you're going to be able to achieve, which is producing the forward force that we're looking for. So that leg that is driving off, the foot that's driving off, that's what's generating your power. Right? The more push off you have, the more power you're going to have, the faster you're going to run. Right? So the forward lean puts you in a position to have the proper extension and generate that forward momentum. If the forward lean is correct, but the runner is still lacking a lot of extension, this is a big time triathlete problem right here. It's most likely due to tight hip flexors due to either an injury or the time they spent on a bicycle. Right? So this is where bike fit really starts to become a big deal, because if your bike fit is not dialed in, if you're not in the correct position from a biomechanical standpoint, you're going to end up with some really tight hip flexors when you get off the bike, right? And what that's going to do, it's going to make it so you simply can't extend, right? It's going to just limit your range of motion as you're going through the extension. So that's something to keep in mind when we're talking about forward lean and extension, running mechanics, running off the bike, and then bike position also. All right, so the third part, leg recovery, and ultimately leg recovery is generated by the extension, which is generated by the forward lean. So it's always coming back to the forward lean. But when we're talking about leg recovery, as the driving foot comes up off the ground and recoils back up, it will ideally touch the line, that blue line that you see right here. It's ideally going to touch that. The toe is going to be on that. So the line is parallel to the ground, right off the bottom of the knee. So you can see, same picture that we had before. She had, what was it, about 6 degrees forward lean, 8 degrees extension. So there's just not a lot of recovery going on here. Right? And if we're looking at it from a head-on view, let's say from right to left, we should not be able to see any of her foot, right? And we can see that if we're looking here, we're going to see the entire bottom part of her running shoe, right? So leg recovery is the part that is generated from good extension, which is generated from good forward lean, all right? So taking a look at all of that, we now want to take a look at what's called elastic recoil, all right? And this is the big thing with running. The more elastic recoil we can generate, the more power we can generate, the more power, the faster speeds we can generate. So elastic recoil, so when the extension is the driving force, the runner ultimately has to get their heel down, right? So what do I mean by that? When, regardless of the foot strike that you're coming in with, whether you're landing on the heel or whether you're landing on the midfoot or the forefoot, your heel still has to make contact with the ground, right? So if you're landing on the heel, your foot has to roll through its entire natural range of motion. So it's on the heel, then the outside part of the foot, to the ball on the outside, to the ball of your foot on the inside part of your foot, and then toe off. If you're landing midfoot or forefoot, your heel still has to get down. It still has to hit the ground, and that's the process that's generating the momentum going forward. So if with the extension, if that's the driving force, the heel has to hit the ground, right? So if it's a heel strike, you got to get up over that heel strike and through the range of motion. If you're landing midfoot or forefoot, your heel is going to come down, touch the ground, and that's your driving force, right? So that right there is what's setting up the elastic recoil, right? So the elastic recoil I'm talking about is generated through the entire posterior chain, posterior being the rear, the back of the body, right? So it starts with the fascia in the bottom of your foot. It goes to the Achilles tendon, goes to the calves, goes to the hamstrings, right? So all three of those, that's the posterior chain. When we get that heel down, right? So at some point, my foot is perfectly flat on the ground. From the moment that my heel starts to come up and I'm going onto the toe of my foot to push off, you're creating a ton of tension that is starting in the bottom of your foot, so the fascia on the bottom, and that tension is extended all the way through the Achilles, through the calf, through the hamstring. The more tension we can generate, the more force we're generating, and that's going to create what we're calling elastic recoil. All right, with the elastic recoil, that's a product of good extension, right? And we're going to see this when we go through a couple pictures of the high caliber triathlete, elite runner, elite marathon runner pictures that we're going to have here in a minute. All right, so with that good forward lean, we get the good extension. With the good extension, we have a very high amount of elastic recoil. So tension's generated from the fascia of the foot, through the Achilles, through the calf, through the hamstring, that toe off is automatically going to flip our foot back up into a good leg recovery position. All right, so with the good extension and elastic recoil, it's just going to pop right up. It's what we just said. All right, so how does this tie together with the leg recovery? If the runner doesn't generate the proper extension, they're simply not going to generate the right amount of elastic recoil. And if we scrolled back to the picture of the woman that we had running, about half of her foot was up above that line that was parallel to the ground, coming right across the bottom of her knee. She didn't have enough extension. Automatically means we don't have enough elastic recoil, means the foot's not going to come up, means the leg is not recovering, right? So the forward lean and the elastic recoil, absolutely the driving force of running. The leg recovery, that's a good indicator that we are doing it correctly, right? So that's how those guys all tie together. It's more evident with a very short stride, because it's going to look like a shuffle. And it's, if you've ever gone and seen an Ironman, you've seen people out there doing the Ironman shuffle down the road, right? And that is due to the lack of extension, which is normally due to the lack of forward lean, or you get to a point, especially in an Ironman, where you're just done running, right? And that happens to a lot of people, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And the more and more you train, it's an accumulative process, and the more load you put on your body over an extended period of time, a couple seasons, 3, 4, 5 seasons worth of preparing for an Ironman, it's just simply going to get better. So, all right. The other last point to this is, as the speed or running speed increases, the forward lean is going to increase, means the extension is going to increase, which ultimately means leg recovery is going to increase too. All right, so let's go ahead and check out some pictures. So we got Chris McCormick here, world champion, Ironman, ITU, Olympic distance, probably one of the top 5 or 10 male triathletes that ever really competed. What we can do, so now this is just a picture that I pulled off the internet, and we can't see his foot, we can't really see the rest of his leg, and I would say that this isn't a perfectly perpendicular angle from camera to runner, right? So with that being said, that's why I just have some general lines drawn up there, but we can see we have that perpendicular line, right? So we've drawn the entire thing through, not only for the extension down here, but for the forward lean up here also. So we can see he definitely has some forward lean going. We can tell that's a pretty solid amount of forward lean. And if we look at the extension, we can get to right about where the bottom of his kneecap would be down here. We can see good forward lean, good extension, right? So that's an example of those two working together. If we take a look at this picture, this is from a few years back, I believe at the Boston Marathon. This is the front pack. These dudes were dropping, somewhere in the mid to high 4-minute mile pace at this point. So let's go ahead and go through this left to right. We can see with this gentleman right here, red shorts, green shirt, we can see tremendous amount of extension. All right. If we come to the second guy from the right, red shirt, black shorts, we can see the forward lean that we have, and you can see he's not even in the full toe off position. We can see the amount of forward lean that he has, and then ultimately the leg recovery way, way up over this, right? So speed is part of what's generating the leg recovery, but also that forward lean in the extension is really what's going to drive the leg recovery. It's really what's going to drive mechanics and going to drive your running speed and your running ability. All right, so got another one here, Ryan Hall, so American marathoner. Great picture of the forward lean right here. So, again, very, very solid. That's pretty close to being as much as in the toe off position as we're going to get. He just isn't into the fully extended leg position when we're looking at upper leg and lower leg. All right, so there's another example. And then the last one, Craig Alexander. So this is from Kona a few years back. I think this was from, he's repeating. He's defending his title, the number 1 right there. This is not a perpendicular shot to him, but you can see, the amount of leg extension that he's generating right here. That's solid, right? So those are some picture examples of what we've been talking about. Real brief rundown on the 3 main keys to running biomechanics. You got the forward lean, which generates the extension. The extension is going to generate the elastic recoil, which is what's the force driving us forward. And then leg recovery is the indicator of whether that is or is not working really well. So, all right, guys, that's the end of the presentation. So let's go ahead and take some questions. If you got them, go ahead and type them in. They can be questions about running mechanics or any other questions you guys have. So go ahead and throw them in there. Lisa.
Hi.
Hey, Lisa. All right, what's your question?
Here.
All right, give me your question.
Yeah. Yeah, so during a warm up, I guess doing that heel to hamstring butt kicker drill would be a way to work on that elastic recoil and getting that foot up, right?
That's a great question, Lisa. So it really depends on the focus of what you're trying to do with the butt kickers, right? So normally when people are doing the butt kickers, they're bringing their foot and their heel up back towards their butt by contracting their hamstring. Okay, and that is not what's taking place in when we're talking about elastic recoil. When we're talking about elastic recoil, it's starting with the foot going through the Achilles calf into the hamstring, right? So that tension that we're generating through the entire posterior chain of the leg that's driving off, that is what brings that foot back up towards the butt. A lot of times when I see people or I've seen people do butt kickers, they're simply running along and they're using their hamstring to bring their foot back up, right? So if I put you into the proper running position where you have, let's say your left foot is forward, right? So you got left foot forward, left arm is back, right arm is forward, right leg is back, right? And we'll say your right leg is in the toe off position. We've generated all of the elastic recoil, right? And we're ready to have you drive off of the ground, driving yourself forward, right? Following me so far? Okay. I think we turned your mic off or something. All right. So um, once we're in that
Yes.
position, you hear, okay, good. There you are. All right. So once you're in that position, if I said to you, bring your foot up and do a butt kicker, that is going to be an incredibly difficult thing for you to do without shifting where your body weight is, without shifting your center of mass. Because when we're in that proper extension, it's the elastic recoil that's going to bring your heel up, not contracting your hamstring to bring your heel up. So whenever we're talking about butt kickers, the butt kicker part of it has to come after we've used the elastic recoil to generate the driving force. Does that kind of make sense?
It's complicated. So why are we doing? Why is that a drill? Why are we doing butt kickers? And when it's being taught, it usually it's stated that you should do them keeping your feet under your hips. Is that incorrect or correct?
When you say keeping your feet under your hips, what do you mean?
In other words, not reaching forward when you do not generating a lot of speed. Like the butt kicker should be done more for form than for forward progression. Does that make sense?
Yep, yep,
Okay.
that makes sense. There's
So why are we doing them?
um I've seen a lot of coaches put them on there because that's what they were told in the certification class. Use these drills. I think that there are a lot of people that do that drill incorrectly, and they're not getting any real benefit out of doing the drill unless they are getting into that extension position and driving off and then working on the butt kicker part of it, right? Or it
Okay.
could be a thing of where once you're driving off, as that leg comes up and you now are has now gone from being fully extended behind you to in the full up forward position, right, where you're about to come forward and land on that leg. Once that leg, the knee gets into the correct position, having been driven forward by the elastic recoil, if the butt is getting kicked then that's a good drill, right? But if you're just running in a vertical position at a nice easy pace and kicking, basically contracting your hamstring to bring your foot up to kick your butt, you're not working on correct form. It's simply you can't run like that. You simply can't. So any of you that are on the call, if you want to try this, once we're done with the call tonight, head out in the front yard or in the street and try running where you are generating the when you're generating that leg recovery by only contracting your hamstring. Try to do it just by starting the contraction with your hamstring, and you're going to see you have to shift so much. You have to shift all of your weight forward. And if we use that same example, when your left foot was on the ground and your right foot was back fully extended, you're going to have to shift all of your weight forward onto your left foot in order to activate your hamstring to bring your foot back up. So I think that there's a lot of coaches that perhaps don't understand the biomechanics really well, and they're not understanding how the drill is or is not fitting into the mechanics, that the proper mechanics, basically. So does that answer your question, Lisa?
Yes, it does. I just have a follow-up.
All
So
right.
what would be your go-to drill to work on this proper form?
The go-to drill would be a forward lean drill. So if you stood up in a completely vertical, rigid position, arms are at your side, bent at a 90-degree angle like you're going to run, and you're simply, your feet, shoulder width apart, maybe a little bit more narrow, and you simply start leaning forward from the ankles until you get to a point where you're going to fall on your face. And what you ultimately do is you just put your foot out and you catch yourself. That's forward lean, right? And if you
Okay.
can do that and you stop yourself and you freeze in that position and someone snapped a picture of it, you would see a few things. One, it's impossible to heel strike without trying to do it if you have the proper forward lean. The second thing is the forward lean is right where we want it. It's in that acceptable 7 to 9 range, or maybe even more, depending on how far you felt you came forward. The third thing you're going to see is your rear leg is in just about the perfect position for extension. Right? So that's the best drill. The problem that people will have is they're going to start feeling forward or start falling forward with that drill, and they're going to actively go, oh boy, I'm falling, and they're going to quickly take a step forward to prevent themselves from falling, instead of, as they're falling, their leg simply comes out to catch themselves. Right? So any of you who have questions about this, see if you can get somebody to film you on the iPhone or whatever it is, and then just shoot that quick video over to me on email, and I can take a look at it and tell you whether you're stepping or whether you're falling and catching yourself. So I'll have to see if I can put together a quick video for that. Maybe I'll have Christy be my demonstrator for that, and I'll get a quick video and we'll put that up. So, great question, Lisa. Got any
Thank
more?
you.
Any more questions?
I'm good.
All right. Thanks, Lisa. All right. Matt. Matt, do you have a microphone today? I'm going to try to bring you on, Matt. Matt, can you hear me? Matt with the microphone. All right, Matt, I'm just going to answer your question.
Hello?
Oh, there you are. Hey, Matt, how are you tonight?
You got me?
Yeah, I got you.
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. What's your question?
Well, I was a heel striker, and then I moved to forefoot, and eventually with the forefoot, I started having Achilles pain, so I started to move to midfoot. Is there any recommendation on where I should strike, or the elite athletes, the best marathon runners, where do they strike? Which part of the foot?
Great questions, Matt. All right, so let's talk about what the elite runners are doing, and then we'll work backwards from there. There is roughly a 50-50 split between heel striking and midfoot / forefoot striking with elite marathoners, whether they're just a straight marathoner, whether it's a triathlete. It extends all the way down to half marathon, 10K, 5K, etc. Right? And there is zero scientific evidence that shows either foot strike is any better than the other one. All right, and what it ultimately is going to boil down to is if you are heel striking, your foot has to get through the full range of motion in order to generate forward momentum. Right, so if you're landing on your heel, you got to get to the toe of your foot in order to drive off. Right, so the flip side of that is if you're landing midfoot or forefoot, your heel has to hit the ground in order to get back onto your toe and generate the proper force going forward. So those of you that are kind of like, why does the heel have to hit the ground? I got a very simple test for you. When we're done with the call, go out in the front yard and try running down the street, only landing on your toes, and then tell me if you could run a 5K like that. And ultimately the answer is you might have the mental toughness to do that. Your body's going to break before you hit the 5K mark. Right? So when it comes to heel striking, which is better, which is worse, it's whatever's more efficient. Right? So if there's a massive heel strike, it can act as a brake, absolutely, because you have to get through the entire range of motion of your foot, which is also called getting up over the top of the heel strike. If you're landing midfoot or forefoot, you got to get your heel down and drive back off. Now, what you had said about you had transitioned from heel striking to forefoot striking, and then you had a bunch of trouble with the Achilles tendon, right? And that's an incredibly common problem. And what that's an indicator of is you've made that transition pretty well. So there's one of two things that could be happening, or both of them at the same time. One is if you're truly running on your toes and your heel is not really getting down, that's going to just completely destroy everything in your foot, your Achilles up through the calf. That's just going to create major issues. The second option, which is the more likely option, the more that you're landing on the midfoot or the forefoot, is you're actually putting a little bit more load on the lower leg, on the Achilles and on the calf. Right, so that's a sign of you actually were starting to do it correctly, but it's not a good sign if you do it for 2 weeks and you're like, yeah, my Achilles hurts, I can't run. Right, that doesn't work. Right, so moving to the midfoot strike like you did, that's ultimately what I would try to get people to do is let's land either perfectly flat or just slightly with the heel up, maybe a quarter to a half inch. If we can get somebody to land there, that's gonna get them going in the right direction. But the one thing that makes this a lot easier is if our forward lean is correct. If we're in that 7 to 9 degree range, or even maybe a little bit more, it's going to be very difficult to heel strike. Very, very, very difficult to heel strike. So does that answer your question, Matt?
It does. Thank you. Also, when I do sprints, should I be landing on my forefoot? I heard that's just the faster reaction.
When people are running at a very hard pace, or sprinting, whatever that may be, you're going to have a very hard time heel striking. And that's just because as you increase the speed, the amount of forward lean is automatically going to increase. So as the forward lean gets to the correct area or more, right? So more than that 9 degree angle, it just becomes incredibly difficult to heel strike without trying to intentionally slide your foot forward enough so that it can actually land on the heel instead of landing on the midfoot. That make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, Matt. All right, we got some questions from Roberta. Roberta, I'm going to bring you in. Roberta, can you hear me?
Sure can.
All right, Roberta, you got a bunch of questions in here. Give them to me.
Okay. I'm trying my darndest to try to improve my run form, which I hope will then facilitate run speed improvement. So I've been working on forefoot landing. I know I'm getting better. I just recently went to a new place to get sneakers, and the woman said to me, "You're not a heel striker." She took a video of me on the treadmill, and sure enough, I'm more on my forefoot, and as a result, I am now getting pain along the, I don't know, I think it's called the anterior, tibial something, the side of the shins. It almost feels like a shin splint, but it's more to the side. I think it happened when I ran long on the street and some hills with the new sneakers. But that's one question, and I think that's a good thing, is I'm more forefront, but I'm now looking at the correlation of my times as it relates to my stride length and cadence, because I know where my cadence is supposed to be, and it seems like I'm running much slower, and I'm trying to look at the correlation between the stride length and the cadence. Stride length, by the way, shows up on my Garmin Connect page, but I've seen it on the Training Peak, so I don't know where I should be, and I'm trying to see what that correlation is. You understand what I'm getting at? In other words, I know cadence affects my speed. It seems to be when I have a higher cadence, I'm not shuffling as much and my speed improves. But then the stride length changes as well, and I'm not sure what the correlation is.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yep, I do.
I don't know where my stride length should be because we've never discussed it, but I'm now looking at it at Garmin Connect.
Okay. When it comes to stride length, right, that's a very individualized answer. Okay, and the reason being, if your foot needs to land directly under your center of mass. Okay, that's if we can get into that position, we're going to be fine, right? Because that's going to be supported by the forward lean, that's going to support the extension and everything that we've talked about. So if somebody's foot is landing forward of where their center mass is, then their stride length is too long. If it's landing short of where their center of mass is, then it's too short. Okay, so that's something that you have to have video to really look at and say, for this athlete, their stride length is correct. Okay, so when it comes to stride length, that's what we're looking at. Okay, so I remember when we filmed you down in Claremont in January, your stride length was incredibly short. Okay, and now that you have moved from a very well-defined heel striker into being more midfoot or forefoot, that's automatically going to start to increase your stride length a little bit, right? So what it's going to boil down to, Roberta, is you got to get Lisa to film you and send me the video so I can take a look at it, right? So it says set the camera up perpendicular to where you're running, like we did in Claremont. Run by the camera, have good strong form running at race pace, and we can really take a look at the stride length, right? So does that answer your question about the stride length?
All right. Well, then, is it worth my looking now at my various runs? Like the run I did this past weekend, I felt really comfortable. And I'm looking, for example, my overall cadence was 169. The average, that's still low, but is it possible that that's where I should be running, not at 180? In other words, do I have to get higher? And the stride length, do I look at the correlation from time to time, or it's irrelevant unless you see me running for this more important, the body position where my foot's coming down? Do I just ignore this whole stride length business then?
At this point in your season, yes, you're well into the taper for Ironman Sweden. You taper and you are where you are. Okay, once we're done with Sweden, then we can start looking at that. But at this point, you're 2.5 weeks out from a race. You're tapering. You're not making any big changes. Okay. What pair of new running shoes did you get?
What happened was I've been always using the Brooks Adrenaline GTS, the one that is the most stability. It's called the, GTS Adrenaline something.
Okay.
And what happened was I was using more of a minimalist shoe. So when I switched over to the heavier GTS again about maybe a month or 6 weeks ago, and I was sliding around in the sneaker getting really bad blisters. So I said, this is silly. I never had blisters before with the minimalist, more of the shoe. So I went to the shoe store, and that's when I picked up. She said to me, she put me on the treadmill and said to me, you're really not a heavy heel striker. You're not pronating a lot. You can go to the medium shoe. It weighs much less. I put it on. So the Brooks and their middle range shoe. So it's not, medium, whatever they call medium stability, as opposed to ultra stability. And I've been feeling much better running on it. I really have. I feel like I'm more on my forefront, but now I've got these ridiculous pains on the side of my shins, and again, I'm not sure how I know I picked that up.
Okay. Well, let's start with the shoes, and then we'll get to the pain in the side of your leg and the calf. Okay. The super duper motion control, max stability, we're not going to let you pronate shoes. Those are absolutely wrong for 95% of the runners out there. Okay, so if the problem is you had a running shoe company that said, hey, look, this person's pronating. Let's create something that will stop that, right? And let's use that as a marketing thing. And that's ultimately what they did, and everybody bought into it, hook, line, and sinker, right? So, Nike and all these other running companies, billions and billions of dollars is what they're generating with this. The problem is that pronation, so those of you that aren't following pronation, when our foot is when it's landed on the ground, so stride forward, landing on the ground, it goes through the natural range of motion, right? So let's say that you're just a little itty bitty heel striker, right? So we're landing on the heel touching first. We'll say that the toe of the shoe is off the ground by 1/8 of an inch, right? So barely a heel striker, right? What has to happen is the heel lands, and as the foot naturally comes down, the outside part of your foot is what's going to land on the ground, right? Because on the inside you have the arch. So unless you have incredibly flat arches or collapsed arches, the inside part of your foot where the arch is isn't going to hit the ground first, right? The outside part's going to hit, and then it rolls through that entire range of motion. The pinky toe is what's going to be the first toe that's going to hit the ground. It rolls through to the ring finger toe, to the bird toe, to the pointer toe, to the thumb toe, right? So that's the range of motion. When that is perfectly flat on the ground, your foot and ankle is going to pronate. It's part of the natural range of motion. And what that means is, if a really bad example, a really extreme example of pronation is when you see the ankle come in where the foot stays flat on the ground, and the leg, it basically is creating kind of a less than sign, if you will, where the bottom part of the less than sign is the foot, the pointy part is the ankle, and the upper part of the less than sign is kind of where the direction of the leg. Okay, and there are some people that have overpronation, and it creates major issues, and that can be a genetic thing, it can be an injury thing more than likely. All right, so when it comes to the pronation part of it, that's completely natural, right? So somebody, it's like, hey, we see this, we can use this, and it stops, it's going to tell people we're going to stop them from pronating. And for a lot of people that are new to running, new to triathlon, people that are overweight, that becomes a very beneficial thing. But when you go to the super duper crazy extreme, no pronation, we're going to lock your foot into place, it's creating other problems. All right. So them transitioning you from the super duper crazy no ankle motion stability shoe to the middle of the road, we got a little bit of support and maybe a little bit of stiffness on that inside part of the shoe, which is ultimately what they're making that rubber part a lot more stiff, so you can't. It's kind of acting as a wedge. When they reduce that down, that's gonna be a lot more beneficial for people. So I'm really glad that they got you into that shoe. The thing that we have to keep in mind is when you transition shoes like you did, or when Matt transitioned from being a heel striker to a midfoot, forefoot striker, it starts creating muscle strain in places that we haven't really used before. So you're just simply activating more muscle and or different muscle fibers that are now coming into play with that new range of motion or the new gait or new mechanics, right? So when it comes to what you should do, those shoes, if they're creating an issue, then we might want to look at even going back to the other shoes for Sweden. But if it's not creating any major issues like, hey, I can't run type of thing, then we can go ahead and go with it. Now, you had told me earlier about some sort of calf issue you were having. Is this the calf issue you're having?
Okay, so I will now I'm rethinking. What happened was I had bought a minimalist Brooks shoe,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I've been running with consistently. Okay, the minimalist shoe. And then I forget what happened, Ryan, or when I switched over, but I said maybe I should go back to the Stability GTS. So I was fine with my minimalist shoe, the sneaker I was wearing,
Mm-hmm.
and then I switched, I don't remember why, to the Brooks Adrenaline, the old one I had in the house. And that's when I was getting the blisters. So I bought both those shoes. Lisa, you're listening to, to that place. Matt, you were there too in Garden City. You know what called? The the running stop. And she put me on the treadmill, and then she said to me, the shoe that I had been running on before the stability was too minimalist. She said to me that wasn't good for me to run with. All right.
Mm-hmm.
That shoe I wasn't having problems with. I don't know why I switched over to the stability. I forget why. So now I've been working on the stability with the blisters, and she said, let's get you the shoe that's the sneaker that's in the middle. So it's the sneaker in the middle that I've been now working on, and I left behind in the place the other two pair. So the minimalist shoe is gone, and the extreme stability shoe is gone, and I got the middle one that I really think is feeling great, and I had that great run with.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if perhaps this is due to the fact that when I ran the 12 miles as well as the 6 miles 2 days before, that was both off the track on, up and down terrain, some
Mhm.
hilly, some not great hilly.
Mhm.
Maybe that's what did it. I ran the 5 miles, then took a day off and ran another 12.
Mhm.
And neither one was on the track, and I always run on the track. So could that have been it? Then I was standing on my feet and walking up and down hills wearing sandals like a jerk the day that I was volunteering. So I don't know who to blame, me or the Schnicker.
Good question. All right, I think that you've kind of nailed it down to what some of the issues were, right? So the going to the new shoe where you have more range of motion and you're getting more midfoot, you're going to ultimately generate more tension in the calf, that the elastic recoil we talked about, and that can create some very interesting um, little things that can pop up. So what you're describing on the side of the leg, I want to say the peroneals, something to that effect. I could be totally off on that. I can never remember that muscle group exactly. That what you're describing though is normally a sign that you're going in the right direction with mechanics. You're doing it too well, too fast. Your body isn't prepared for that. And I think the pain that you're feeling now that you've described, you took the new shoes with the newer mechanics and started running uphill and downhill. That's going to exacerbate it, or basically magnify what we're talking about. And then you add in that you're out at Lake Placid walking up and down hills in sandals. I think we've pretty much nailed down why your calf is bothering you a little bit. So if you end up with calf pain, everybody out there, foam roller is your BFF, right? Get on that thing, roll it out. You get to what's called a trigger point, or where it's like, ow, that really, really hurts. You stop right there on it. You apply a little bit more pressure. You hold it there for maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds if you're tough, and you focus on your breathing, nice, deep, rhythmic breathing, and that's going to release the trigger point. All right, so Roberta, outstanding questions. Thank you for coming on. And I'm going to bring on Vincent. Vincent, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey, how are you? Welcome to the Triathlon Study Hall. What questions you got for me today?
In regard to the threshold values in training peaks,
Mm-hmm.
what's your recommended method of setting slash measuring it? And does this method differs if you're racing short distance versus long distance?
Wow, great questions, Vincent. All right, let me go through them one at a time. I'm going to start with the second one first. So actually, I'm going to start with the first one first. So how am I going to measure them? How am I going to determine what my threshold speed is? You ultimately have to do a run test for it, right? So it can be a run test of anything from 1 mile, 2 mile, 5K, 10K, any standard known distance is going to be sufficient to generate what is basically your velocity at lactate threshold, right? So a really outstanding website that's out there. It's open to the public. It's completely free. It's called Macmillan Running. And if you Google that, just Google Macmillan Running Calculator, right? And it'll take you to the Macmillan Running page. It's on the front page, and you can see all the different distances that are available. You type in what your time was for that given distance. You hit the calculate button, and what that's going to do is run through its calculations, and it's going to tell you. So let's say we put in 20 minutes for a 5K. Okay. It's going to tell you the 5K, you ran this many kilometers per hour, this many miles per hour, and then it's going to predict other race times based off of that. So you could run a 5K, it goes through their logarithm and it'll calculate, hey, if you right now ran a 10K, it would be at this speed. If you ran, and this time, this would be your half marathon time, your marathon time. And it's a pretty good and solid calculator. It is using the middle of the road athletes, so athletes that are on the higher end, kind of like what you're aiming at with racing at Worlds. It might be a little on the low side, but as long as we're using the same method and the same technology every time, it's going to be consistent. All right, and that consistency with the measuring and with the method of calculating it is the biggest thing that we want. So when you type that in there, it's also going to give you two numbers closer to the top of the page. One is a lowercase v, then with the capital L and T, so velocity at lactate threshold. And then it's going to give you another pace, which is VO2. right? So that's the velocity at which you're reaching VO2 max or VO2 peak, okay? So you're going to do a run test of some known distance. You're going to record the time. You dump it in a Macmillan calculator, and it pops out your velocity at lactate threshold. So does that answer question number one?
Yes, it does.
All right, outstanding. Now, question number two, which is the best question. All right, would I do it differently? Would I have you do a different run test based off of the distance of the event you were doing? Yes, absolutely. Right. So if you're doing sprint distance triathlons, I'm perfectly content having you do a 1 mile, 2 mile, or a 5K run test, and that's going to be what we need, right? So one mile, we're going to get onto the faster end of it, and I probably for you would have you do the 1 mile run test, because it's if there is a small error in the calculations because you're on the higher end of athletic ability and it's aiming at the middle of the road athlete, the faster test is going to, I think, get you slightly more accurate. I mean, we're talking like 1%, maybe 2% more accurate. So it pretty much is within the margin of error. I think I would aim at that. If we're looking at an Olympic distance, which is what you're preparing for at the World Championships in Chicago, I would say 5K or a 10K would be good. I think you could get away with the 1 mile test and it would be perfectly fine. Once we transition up to the long course type stuff, the half Ironman and the full Ironman distance, we really want to start looking at longer distance tests, right? So for somebody who is doing the half or the full distance, I would probably aim at a 5K. And then for some of the faster or high caliber athletes that are looking at an Ironman, so a guy who is going to go 10 hours or less, let's say 10:30 or less for a guy, a gal who's going to go maybe 11:30 or less in a full Ironman, then I'm going to start really looking at the 10K, because that's going to be far more representative of their running ability for a longer distance. Does that make sense?
It does.
Absolutely. All right, good. Any more questions, Vincent?
No, that's it for now.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. All right. What else do we got? We got Matt asking, what is chi running? Chi running, great question, Matt. It is a method of running. So you got chi, you got pose, you got a bunch of these other different things. Chi running, the main gist of it is using gravity and using body position to move yourself forward as the main driving force, right? And the biggest thing that chi running uses with a focus is driving your elbows backwards to really generate forward momentum, right? So the more arm drive where your elbows coming backwards, that's going to help you run faster, and that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. I think that my theory on the running biomechanics, if you were going to try to fit that into a box of hey, it's chi running or pose or whatever it may be, it's probably going to be closest to chi running. I prefer to have athletes focus on the forward lean, which is going to put them in the right position to let gravity help them drive themselves forward, and not so much focusing on the arm action on the back side of it, right? But it's either way. I think that it's a pretty solid way of looking at it. And on another note, with the question Roberta had asked previously about cadence, and I have a higher cadence or a lower cadence, and how that ties into chi running and running form. So if you're wanting to increase your cadence, right, trying to make your legs move faster is either going to do one of two things. It's going to make you run faster, right? Which, okay, that's cool. So now I'm running at 90% of my lactate threshold velocity, but I'm never going to run at that in an Ironman, right? So is that helping you? No, not really. The other thing that people are going to do is try to use their arm swing to generate a higher rate of turnover, right? So what I would tell you, so go back to Roberta's question, if you're wanting to increase your cadence, or anybody out there is wanting to increase the cadence, increase the speed in which your arms move, right? Because it's going to prevent you from either running faster to increase your cadence or shortening up your run stride to increase your cadence, right? So I can go from a normal run stride to short and choppy, and sure, I'm 90 foot strikes a minute, 100 foot strikes a minute. Look at this. Yeah, my stride length is so short that I'm not going anywhere, right? So the best answer, use the elbows and the drive backwards. That's going to help generate more speed, and it's also going to increase your run cadence. So great question, Matt. All right, guys, more questions, type them in. We got a few minutes left. We got Lisa. Great comment by Lisa. She has a lacrosse ball, right? So that's, those of you that know what the sport lacrosse is, they have a stick and a helmet, the ball, and they looks like they run around and whack each other all day. But the ball itself is a rubberized ball, but it's not very squishy, right? So if you imagine, we have on one extreme we have a baseball, and on the other extreme we have a tennis ball, right? So the tennis ball we can squeeze in our hand, we can manipulate it, we can mush it, squish it, whatever it is. Baseball, good luck. You're not squishing that very much, right? So if we're rolling on a baseball, there's just not a lot of give, at all, right? So that becomes more painful, becomes more difficult. If we're rolling on a tennis ball, it's going to give too much. We're not able to generate enough force or pressure on the muscle that we're trying to do. So Lisa found the perfect tool, which is the lacrosse ball, right? There, I think you can get them for $4 or $5 a piece, super inexpensive. The only other one that I would say is better than that is the one that's made by Trigger Point, and it's called the TP massage ball. It's a little more giving than the lacrosse ball, but definitely firmer than a baseball or a softball or something like that. So if you can get a lacrosse ball or get the Trigger Point TP massage ball, absolute must have for some serious triathletes. So all right, give me some more questions. Let's try to get one more good one in, guys. All right, we got one more for Matt.
All right, so I try to run in the morning because it gets really hot and humid in New York, and last week I had heat exhaustion. But is there any way to loosen up, because I don't have the same vigor and energy that I would have in the middle of the day? So I feel that I'm not running at my best ability at, like, say, 6 in the morning.
Good question.
Any drills or, yeah.
Yeah, there are some drills. I'm going to have to put together a short video on some good dynamic warm-up movements and some low intensity, low impact running drills that you guys can use. I think that's going to be one of the main focuses. When we do the winter camp out here in San Diego in January, we're going to make sure that everybody that comes out gets a wealth of information on that type of stuff. What I would tell you right now, if you're doing a basic aerobic type run, just work into it. Start off at a lower speed, work into it, because it's an aerobic run. There isn't a tremendous amount of speed that's required there. If you're talking about something where we have intervals or where there's a lot more speed required, I'll get you the stuff on the dynamic warm up and some low intensity running drills. But I think that simply extending the warm up and knowing that instead of 5 or 10 minutes worth of jogging before we get into a track workout or a speed session, we might need 15, 20, 30 minutes worth of a warm up. And I know that as I've gotten older, I've hopped on the CompuTrainer, done some high intensity interval sessions, and if I'm doing, let's say, 8 times 4 minutes up in zone 5, if I look at the power output for intervals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, if I don't have a sufficient warm up, that first 4-minute interval or the second one, it's low. I'm just simply not warmed up, right? So I have the ability to look at that and go, yeah, I just simply wasn't warmed up. So what I would tell you is focus on a longer warm up, right? So any some low intensity skipping, so not skipping for distance, but just low intensity skipping, add in some arm swings, arm circles, stuff like that's going to work really well. You can look at A skips, B skips, C skips. Any of the basic running drills are going to work well. I would try to stay away from the butt kickers like we talked about earlier, but just take a look at the total warm-up time that you're using. And if it's an aerobic run, if your goal pace is, let's say an 8-minute mile for, a 60-minute run, if you run the first 10 minutes at start at a 9-minute mile and work up to that 8-minute mile over the first 10 minutes, there's no issue with that. There's absolutely no issue with that, right? But if it's a thing of where we're doing 800s and we're trying to hit a specific time and you take the first 400 to go from a 9-minute pace down to a 6-minute pace, now you're missing it on the interval. So it depends on the type of workout, and it depends on, you know, the length that the duration of the warm up that's going to make sure that you're loosened up properly. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but I missed some of it. I lost connection for a bit.
Okay.
So
I'll sum it up for you real quick. Make sure your warm up is longer.
what to focus on? I lost you at what to focus on.
Yeah, make sure your warm up is longer. Right? It
Yeah.
sounds to me like you're not getting warmed up enough. So if it's an aerobic session, just work into it, right? If it's a speed session or a track session, then just make sure your warm up is longer, right? Just start at the lower intensity, work your way up to feeling warm, right? That makes sense?
Got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks again, Matt. All right, we got one last question. This one's from Lisa. What are my thoughts on a treadmill? When you live in New York or Chicago, treadmill is your BFF because there's ice and snow and other fun things that fall out of the sky and stay on the ground for 3 or 4 months. We don't have that problem here in San Diego, thankfully, but I did live in Chicago for a while, and that just isn't very fun. So, thoughts in general on a treadmill? Outstanding question. Treadmill is a great training tool. It really, really is. I know of quite a few athletes who only run on a treadmill. And the reason being, they click the little button, it generates the speed that they're wanting to run at. It's not going to change unless they either push a button, they hop off of the treadmill, or they get shot off the back of it, right? So I think as long as you're setting the treadmill at 1% or 1 degree incline, I think the treadmill is phenomenal, especially when we're looking at, hey, here's a specific interval, here's some speed work, whatever it is. If we're aiming at running 400s at, you know, a 6-minute pace, you can set that on the treadmill, right? And all you have to do is keep running. It's not going to slow down, right? So it's the equivalent of using a CompuTrainer or a trainer on the bicycle, where you don't have to worry about stop signs and intersections and other people and cars and dogs and all the other stuff while you're running. But it's setting it at that 1 degree incline. That's going to get it the metabolic cost of it as close as we can to running out on the road. So in general, I would say treadmill is great. Just get the incline set at the proper number, 1 degree or 1%, whatever, you know, the treadmill is calling it on, you know, that specific model. So treadmill is great, especially for speed work. You know, 400s, 800s, you know, 1 kilometer repeats, 1 mile repeats. You set the speed that you want it at, and you just simply focus on running. Right? You're not going to have the natural slowing down towards the end of a workout that you would see perhaps out on the track or out on the road, because you're on a treadmill. It's not slowing down. The speed is not going to decrease unless you push the button. So, all right, guys. Hey, this was a great call. We had some absolutely outstanding questions tonight. I appreciate you guys coming on. The next session, as you see up on the screen, Tuesday, August 4th, same time. Wait until tomorrow, midday, before you click that link right there. I got to get it all switched over to the next session. Those of you that have not taken advantage of the membership program, outstanding offer right here, 2 weeks of free trial. Basically, membership program gets you the group coaching calls like we're on right now, Triathlon Study Hall, gets you training plan of your choice every 4 weeks, all kinds of other phenomenal benefits, gets you on the Facebook group that's coach monitored with accountability, gets you all kinds of discounts and great things. So if you want to take advantage of the 2 free weeks of the membership program or the MPro, in the shopping cart, use the code MPRO-2-weeks, type that in, get you 2 weeks for free. So, all right, guys, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next week.